Yeah, people are rehabilitatable. Exactly, Entrama. And try saying that word on the first try 3 times, okay?
Aaron joins Michelle Martin.
Thanks, Fiona. Aaron, thank you so much for talking with us.
Thank you for having me.
You wrote this.
Also, this would be really hard, going on national television to talk about how you were almost a mass shooter.
Incredible piece back in February of 2018 saying that you could have been a school shooter yourself. What possessed you to write that piece? What encouraged you to speak out in that way?
It was the shooting in Parkland High School that gave me the impetus to come out with my story. The day after the shooting, me and my wife and my oldest daughter, we were watching the news, and we were watching a report specifically of a reporter asking a kid who has just left the school. I believe they still had blood on them from the shooting.
Jesus.
And the reporter was asking, "How do you feel?" And to me, that was the most dehumanizing and depersonalizing thing. They were just turning that victim into a commodity. And it really, it made me, I went to the back of my house and I wrote literally a Facebook post.
I was not expecting this guy to be based, but that is exactly what that reporter did.
And in that, I came out with my story.
Talk me through it. What brought you to the point where you could envision killing your classmates? You wrote this in 2018, that the two places you thought to go were a school or a mall food court. And as we are speaking now, just recently, a young man with a high-powered weapon tried to kill a bunch of people. In fact, did kill some people at a mall food court. And this, of course, was just days after another devastating shooting at the school in Uvalde, Texas. So what is it that brought you to that point where you had so much rage that you wanted to kill people? You didn't even know.
Well, I grew up in a really violent and aggressive house. From early on, from my birth to about 5, I described it living like a Stephen King movie. Really extreme violence, every kind of abuse you can imagine. Very nomadic lifestyle. And then after that, when we left my birth father and got with my stepdad, it moved from Stephen King to Scarface. So it went from extreme violence to crack cocaine and crime and stealing. And growing up, I went to about 40 different schools. We moved every 6 months or so. Every couple of months, we get evicted or run from the authorities, or social worker would try to intervene and we'd escape. I was always the new kid growing up, always had a new set of bullies at every new school I went to. I was dirty and smelly. And as I was a young kid growing up in that toxic environment, I really adapted that as my personality. And I became toxic myself really early on. When I was about 9, 10 years old, I became just offensive and disgusting. And I was a very toxic young kid. And that got me bullied. And I was bullied when I was growing up. And then as I became a teen, I became the bully. And I decided that if I'm the worthless one, and everybody in my life tells me I'm worthless, then I'm going to be the best worthless one I can be, and I'll show you what a monster is. And I was 15 years old. I was homeless, had been homeless for a couple months at the time, sleeping in my friend's shed. And it was middle of the night. I was cutting myself so bad, a pool of blood was forming underneath me. And I thought, I have to get help. I'm at the bottom. So I tried to get myself to help, went to social services, called social services on myself. They had tried to intervene a couple times in my life, and they were the reason why we had left a couple of houses. So I knew that might be a source to go to. And when I went to social services, they not only brought me in, but they brought my mom in, who was one of my biggest abusers in my life. And that time, even though I produced a bloody razor blade and I told them that the reason I was there was that I felt like I was nothing and I felt like I was worthless, I was at the bottom, they believed my mom in saying that I was just doing it for attention, that I was just making it all up. And then they sent me home with her. And when they sent me home with her, her response was to tell me that I should have done a better job, and next time she'll buy the razor blades. So that sent me on what I call my scorched earth time. For about the next 9 months, I was just burning down every bit of support that I had, every positive thing. And after about 9 months of destroying every positive relationship I had in my world, anybody that was nice to me, I was going to prove to you that you shouldn't be. And I tried to get help again. I was at the bottom again, tried to go to social services one more time, thinking that if I warned them last time and that was toxic. So this time I'm just going to show up. And so I went to a place that just said mental health on the sign. And I don't really remember that conversation because all I remember is the end of it. And that is when the young lady who saw me said, "I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do. I can't help you." And as I walked out of that door, my brain just shattered. And
Jesus.
I discovered what was under that tsunami of anger. When you finally go underneath all that pain, it gets really quiet and it gets really still, because when you don't really have anything left to lose, then you don't have anything left to care about.
Where did the idea of getting a gun and shooting a bunch of people come from? Like, had you seen that somewhere, or how did that come to you?
I didn't really have friends at the time, but I had people around me, and I call them now disaster groupies. They were kids around me that kind of wanted to live vicariously through my damage. It was basically like an in-person YouTube group or a social media group where they would push me further into the dark to see how far I would go. And in that group, while I was homeless, living, hanging out with those friends, instead of talking about girls or sports or movies, we talk about killing people. We talk about, if you're going to kill 10 people, what would you do? If you're going to shoot up a school, what would you do? And it was just like the fiction of the group. It was our version of like a dark fantasy football. And when I hit that spot where
By the way, chat, there's 110,000% channels like that on places like 4chan or 8kun, or whatever it's called these days, where they do exactly this. KUN, Entrama, there's 100% places like that, where they do exactly what this guy is describing. They circle jerk about violence. It used to be 8chan. It's called something else now. I know it used to be called 8kun at some point, but then they changed the name again.
all the plans just crystallized. I knew what I was going to do. I had already planned it all out. I was going to go either through the school, the doors to the food court, or to the mall food court. And the only difference of that would have been the time of day I got the weapon.
Very knifey duck. Thank you very much for the gifted sub to Abusel, which is very kind of you. Thank you so goddamn much. Also, I'm realizing that the alert box is hidden underneath everything else. I'll just fix that. And also move up the sound source. So I got it all in one spot. And again, please chat, dono and sub, because I just paid my rent and holy shit.
And
why there? Why were those your two choices? I mean, school, I guess, because that was kind of one of the sources of pain for you.
Abortion.
That's where the bullies were? Or like what?
The rent is too goddamn high.
Why
honestly, it wasn't. Neither one of those places were because of the bullies. I hadn't really been at the school long enough to acquire that many bullies from that particular school. It was really that my goal was to cause an immense damage and destruction and make my parents deal with creating me. I wanted to make them deal with.
Hey, Ryla, thank you very much for gifting Airbnb Abortion a sub.
And the school and the mall were both ripe targets in the sense that I could cause mass damage and at the same time die by suicide by cop, because neither of those locations were what we consider soft targets. There were armed, uniformed officers stationed in the school at all times. And in the mall, there was literally a police station like 4 or 5 doors down from the food court.
Hey,
that was just part of my plan. I was planning on committing the act and then dying by suicide by cop.
Why is that what you wanted? Did you think that would like take the pain away, or what you wanted to? Why is that what you wanted?
I don't think taking the pain away was even an option in my reality. I felt invisible when I was at that age. I felt like when I was between like 13 and 16, I would literally ask the people I was around, "Do you remember me when I leave the room? If I walk away, do you know who I am?" And I thought I was invisible. I thought that I was the worthless one. When I would stand up off a couch, I thought people would walk back on me and scrub the spot that I was get off of because it was so filthy. And that I was like a void. And at that moment, when I was in my darkest spot, I didn't feel human. I felt absolutely inhuman. I felt like I was just destruction. Like I had lost all sense of humanity. And in that time, I walked out of that room, my brain shattered. All the plans crystallized. And part of that plan was I knew where to get a weapon because there was gangbangers it was mid-90s. Gangs were really prevalent. And there were some gangbangers that brought guns to school all the time. They would flash handguns and stuff at school, and they would talk about having rifles. And they sold drugs to my family. They knew me. And so I walked up to him and said, "Hey, can you get me a gun? Hopefully one that shoots a lot of bullets." And the guy's like, "Yeah, sure. Get me an ounce of weed." And that was the easiest part of the whole thing because I just walked to my mom's house, stole an ounce of marijuana off the druggie sleeping off her floor, one of my brother's friends, and took it to him.
Why, forgive me, but why you had the means, you had the motivation, but you didn't do it. And obviously we're all really thankful that you didn't, but why didn't you?
Because in that time, after I had planned to get the gun, I went on what I thought, I didn't look at it now, but at the time I was saying goodbye. I was giving away my belongings and kind of closing off relationships in a much more peaceful way than before. I wasn't being antagonistic. I was just kind of closing off friendships. And during that time, I went to my friend Mike's house. And I met Mike when I was 12 years old. He was 10. We bonded over comic books. He had the exact opposite life that I had. He had a very loving family, very supportive. His parents still live in that house to this day. His dreams were very encouraged. He went into all the clubs he loved, and any activity he got into, he was encouraged. Very, very loving and stable house. And over the years, he was my home base. So when I was being nomadic and moving from place to place and living on the streets, he never moved. So his place was like home base. So when I was in my darkest spot, when I was homeless and living in the fields and living on free samples, I would live in his shed. That's the night when I went to social services were from his shed. So in that time, I went and knocked on his door, and I was saying goodbye. And he opened up and saw me. And he didn't know what I was planning, but he saw the pain that I was in. And he knew the hell that I'd been living in. And he brought me in and treated me like I was a person. And I was absolutely inhuman at the time. I was nothing but destruction and death. And he treated me like I was just a kid in pain. And he brought me in, and we had food, gave me a shower, and he would tell me always, "I'm a good kid in a crap world," is what he would say. And I stayed with him during that time. Being treated like a person when you don't feel like a human will literally change your world. And it was the most powerful thing that ever happened to me. And he's still my best friend to this day. He's still uncle to my kids.
And you know what? You have Donald Trump on the other hand. Hey, chat. Here's Donald Trump discussing his plan to fix homelessness in America.
Time to get brutally tough on the dealers and traffickers and narco-terrorist cartels who are stealing over 200,000 American lives a year. And that's a very low number compared to what the real number is. It's a very low. Think of it, 200,000. You don't lose that in wars. You don't lose that in wars. And yes, these drug traffickers should and must receive the death penalty. And I'll tell you, just from dealing with the heads of other countries, I said to President Xi of China, "Do you have a drug problem?" "No, no, no." "Why do we ask such a question?" "No." He almost didn't know what I was talking about. "No, no." I said, "Why do you think?" "Well, if somebody is selling drugs, they get the quick trial. Letting people live in the street of a major city, or anywhere for that matter, with needles, drugs, squalor, is not good for anybody. For the good of everyone involved, the homeless need to go to shelters, the long-term mentally ill need to go to institutions, and the unhoused drug addicts need to go to rehab.
God, or maybe we should just treat them like human beings and give them homes. A thing that we know from other nations that have implemented these policies, or other cities that have implemented these policies, fixes homelessness. Capitalism does make money off of poor people. You know, Terry Pratchett had a legendary quote on what was called Boots theory, okay? It's called Boots Theory, chat. And he had a character who went around solving crimes and ruminated about the state of the world and the state of things that are so incorrect. And here is the quote, okay? The reason that the rich were so rich, Vimes reasoned, was because they managed to spend less money. Take Boots, for example. He earned $38 a month plus allowances. A really good pair of leather boots cost $50, but an affordable pair of boots, which were sort of okay for a season or two and then leaked like hell when the cardboard gave out, cost about $10. Those were the kind of boots Vimes always bought, and wore until the soles were so thin that he could tell that he was an Moorpork on a foggy night by the feel of the cobblestones. But the thing was that good boots lasted for years and years. A man who could afford $50 had a pair of boots that'd still be keeping his feet dry in 10 years' time, while the poor man who could only afford cheap boots would have spent $100 on boots in the same time and would still have wet feet. This was Captain Samuel Vimes' Boots theory of socioeconomic unfairness. This is from the book Men at Arms, the Play. It is why it is provably, there has been research done. There is research done on this, that it costs more to be poor. It costs you more to be poor, to live in poverty. And guess what? It costs society more for people to be living in poverty. Because the costs that poor folks can't pay up front and lead them to buy cheaper options, worse, unhealthier options when it comes to food, less long-lasting options when it comes to basically everything else. Well, those costs are then offset by society. You know, like if you are put in a bad economic position where you don't have the time or money to be able to eat properly, that's incurring socioeconomic costs that are down the road. You know, in the long run, there are, buying at dollar stores is another great example of this. It's all fucking distorted, and This is the thing. So let's listen to Donald Trump's plan for the homeless. Instead of giving them homes, what does Donald Trump want to give the homeless?
Or if necessary, an appropriate jail. They've taken over our cities, so many of our cities. It's at a level that nobody can even believe. But wherever they go, surrendering our parks and sidewalks to people that in many cases are crazed, very sick, it's just not an option.
Oh, I guess he didn't, I guess this clip doesn't have it. 1 second. I do have the clip, though.
Perhaps some people will not like hearing this, but the only way you're going to remove the hundreds of thousands of people, and maybe throughout our nation, millions of people we're talking about.
By the way, notice, removing millions of people, the infrastructure it would take to remove millions of people from everyday society. This is literal concentration camp talk.
And help make our cities clean, safe, and beautiful again.
This is Nazi rhetoric, by the way. People after Kristallnacht were like, yeah, those Jews, they're real dirty and gross, and they're making our cities unsafe by not having homes. Look at the state of all of their businesses, windows all broken and shit. We better put them in their own places. You know, somewhere, I don't know, right outside the city, maybe. In their own, I don't know, like kind of, we'll gate them in. They won't be able to leave.
Open up large parcels of inexpensive land in the outer reaches of the cities Bring medical professionals, including doctors, psychiatrists, psychologists, drug rehab specialists, build permanent bathrooms and other facilities, make them good, make them hard, but build them fast, and create thousands and thousands of high-quality tents, which can be done in one day.
Bitch, if you're going to go through the expense of building, like, facilities for people to use, and then build thousands and thousands of tents, just build them homes. Just give homeless people homes. You can literally build a building with all of the infrastructure you're talking about and give them homes. But what you are proposing is a literal concentration camp, and you know that you are not going, like, you gold-plated toilet bastard that you are, you're not going to be spending money to give these people doctors. You're not going to be spending money to get them into drug rehab. You're not going to be spending money on shit. You're going to give them, like, a fucking tent and lock them into a camp. That's what you're going to do. And any person with their eyes even half open, who's even half awake, can tell what the fuck you're gonna do. I'm sorry, folks. This story made me so mad when I saw it earlier today. You think this motherfucker who lives in a literal gold palace, you think this motherfucker cares about homeless people? You think this guy cares about homeless people? Nah, all he cares about is getting rid of homeless people. That's the only thing he cares about. He doesn't care about treating them like people. He doesn't care about fixing their illness. He just wants them out of sight. And once they're out of sight, well, really anything could be done to them, you know? They could be experimented on for medical reasons. They could be fucking murdered en masse. He doesn't give a shit.
And you have to move people out. Now, some people say, oh, that's so horrible. No, what's horrible is what's happening now. Because now they're in tents, but most of them aren't even tents that function.
Yeah, oh, yeah. What's horrible is the fact that they have bad tents, and we'll get them good tents. We'll get them good tents in the concentration camps we're going to build for them. Just build them homes where they can live, where they can get better, where they can have some fucking dignity and feel like human fucking beings. Because feeling like a human being literally saves, like, the lives of both the homeless and anyone that they might, like, in their desperation, hurt. Because hurt people. And I have a very hard time imagining hurting more than when you're homeless.
So today I'm a happy family man, father of 4.
This is,
You've given us so.
This is what, by the way, treating someone like a human being does. It can literally bring them back from the point of committing a mass shooting. God, I wish Republicans cared. God, I wish conservatives would actually listen to these kinds of stories and be able to connect them with the rest of the experiences, the rest of the things that they see going on in modern society. Because, holy shit, the conservative mind sees this and they're like, yeah, he put in a lot of work and turned his life around. And yeah, he did put in a lot of work and he did turn his life around, but he was able to do that because he was treated like a fucking human being. Conservative politicians are ontologically evil and opposed to life. They are anti-life. They are in it for themselves, regardless of the destruction they wreak on the environment, on the planet, on human beings. But I do believe that there are conservative people out there who just go to work, they go to the bar, and then they go home. And I don't think those people are necessarily bad people. They just aren't connecting the dots here. And I hope that they are one day able to do so. Because if they don't, they're not going to wake up to the fact that they are in a fucking death cult that is willing to kill them, their children, and all of their progeny just to get a few more dollars.
To think about. But is it really that one intervention at the right time was enough to keep you from killing people?
It really was. At the time, everybody else in my world, every other person I was encountering, I was either a monster or a project. I was either something to be feared or something to be fixed. I wasn't a person at all to anybody. And even to myself, I wasn't human. And being reminded that pain is temporary and that I was actually a good person all the time. I was just dealing with this massive amount of trauma that I had been going through. And at the time, I didn't see it. It took years of personal recovery to fully get out of that depression. But Mike, in that moment, he diverted it, and it went from an outward kind of push to, it was really much a lot like a splash of cold water. It was like the grounding. It was like resetting the clock back to being a person.
If you had been able to get your hands on a gun, I mean, you said at one point you could have gotten a gun from one of your gang-involved associates at school, right?
There would be no war in Ukraine if Mr. Trump was still in office? How so? The United States and Ukraine have no treaties. It's not like we would go to war to protect Ukraine. So how would that have stopped Putin from invading Ukraine? They're not a part of NATO.
Did you actually get it?
I didn't. My going to Mike's house, I was set to get the gun in 3 days. I stayed at his house for about a week and a half. I never ended up going and getting the gun.
If you had been able to get your hands on a gun when you were in that heightened state, right? Mm-hmm. Would you have used it?
Yes. The instant that would have been in my hands, I would have used it. It would have just been the tool of destruction. And mind you, this is in 96. So this is pre-Columbine. The pain and destruction was still there. It's the guns, I believe, are just the tool that we use now because you can cause the most damage with it. Like, for example, we have these couple recent school shootings, and I see a lot of parallels in my story with the most recent ones, specifically the ones in Uvalde and this last one in Highland Park. I see a lot of similarities. The story of the kid in Uvalde seems like he went down almost exactly my path. Like, it looks like he spent his early years in a very abusive, restrictive, and oppressive house with a lot of aggression and violence in the home. And then that turned into where he became toxic and adopted that as his persona. And even right before his shooting, he showed up to the school a couple weeks before with his face covered in slice marks. This razor marks cutting his face from the reports I heard. That is like the most visible sign of I'm hurting myself, someone see it. And that none of that's an excuse. It's not an excuse for any of the destruction whatsoever. It's not whatsoever to excuse that. But it is a reason why that slide happens. And it's more just to look at the slide itself. That's the path that we go down. That you start with self-loathing and self-hatred, you end up metastasizing that to your own personality and then expressing that to the world. Because when you think you're worthless,
this is the best interview related to mass shootings that I've ever seen. Had a leg there and thought when Biden says, "Come on, Jack," is he talking to Riverboat Jack? He is. I'm actually I'm not getting paid right now, so I'm not. He's trying to get me to do things. I'm not doing them.
You're going to do everything you can to make the world agree with you.
The guns, getting access to these kinds of guns. On the one hand, people were saying, look, there are a lot of people in pain all over the world, but in the United States, we allow people to pick up a high-powered, battlefield weapon and kill a bunch of people at once.
When I was spiraling in a manic depressive episode, my bestie was just like, I'm here to listen, and I broke down in tears and brought myself to seek out therapy and medication. She didn't do anything except sit with me when I was in my most vulnerable and gave me the love I needed. Love my bestie. Hell yeah, Metal Kitty Mom. Sometimes we just need someone there, you know?
And the obvious answer, people say, well, make it harder to get these guns, or don't sell these guns to civilians at all. And other people say, well, it's not the gun that gets the people. What do you say to that?
I personally believe that when people argue about these two topics, they use the terms gun control and then mental health as kind of catch-alls for each side. And I really believe that those terms are diversionary to the extreme. So if you say gun control, you get lost in the minutiae of the details. You get lost. Is that a bump stock? Is that what kind of ammunition is that? Is that an assault rifle? And you lose sight of the fact that the goal of the argument is you want to keep weapons that can kill a lot of people out of the hands of someone like I was 25 years ago. That's the goal. And and if you get lost in the specifics, or you try to find a panacea that is a fix-all for all of it, then you're not going to make any progress. The perfect is the enemy of good. And so if we can't, people always want to have the law that, well, if that's not going to solve all school shootings, then we can't do it. It's not going to stop all school shootings. It might only stop one, but one has to be enough. And we have to start somewhere. And we have the same problem with mental health. People say that we have a mental health issue. Well, what does that mean? It's this big, gray, oblique thing, and you can't really wrap your hands around it. And so you get lost into that haze of what...
I mean, what that means is we have an issue when it comes to, like, the ability to afford mental health care. Like, holy shit. Like, it's expensive as hell, guys. And, like, without you people, I wouldn't be able to afford to go see my therapist. In order to have coverage to see my therapist, I need to have a fucking real good plan. Okay? So my insurance plan is fucking expensive. It's like $360, $380 a month. Okay? It's ridiculously expensive. And if you are uninsured, it's also going to cost you out the nose. Well, Metal Kitty Mom, because I'm trans, like, I need to hit that deductible. Yeah, and part of the problem is we need people to be able to go and seek out mental health help. I'm sorry, but like the phone apps where you're like Better Health or whatever, those don't help that much. Sometimes you need to see like an actual living, breathing person in the room with you. And once you know your therapist, once you know you can trust someone, and you've seen them in person for a while, you can get away with like the video calls, but you need, especially when you're in crisis, that other human being to be in the room with you. My healthcare is free. This is insane to me. Wait, Metal Kitty Mom, are you, like, in Canada or something? Like, I do not, like, my health insurance is considered good, and I have, like, a $1,000 deductible. So I have to pay out of pocket $1,000 before my insurance actually kicks in. And once it kicks in, which it usually does around, like, a third of the way through the year, then it covers 75% of the things it covers. But it still costs me money. And it doesn't cover everything. My pills, for example, are partially covered, but every 3 months, I have to pay like $250 out of pocket. Only $1,000? Yeah, Stoudman. That's what I pay. I pay like $380 for $1,000 deductible. I pay a lot of money because I go to the doctor a lot. I go to the doctor a lot because of like trans shit. And like, is that per month or per appointment? Yeah, it's $380 per month. Damn, healthcare is crazy. It is. And that's why I'm trying, before shit hits the fan, to get like some of my trans surgeries done, usually towards the end of the year, so that I can like get them and have it covered by my health insurance. Like if something bad happens, it still costs thousands of dollars. Like when I had my gallbladder out, I was covered by this insurance plan. And it still cost me like $5,000 to have my gallbladder removed. And there was nothing I could do to prevent that. It just happened. It got infected. And it cost me $5,000 with insurance coverage. Without it would have cost me like $20,000 or $30,000. But it like, if I had like a gallbladder emergency right now, I'd probably need to like ask family members for money, because I do not have that much money saved up. Yeah, America's wildin', and frankly, all this shit should be free. We're paying this much money to line the pockets of American CEOs, and that makes me so goddamn mad.
So instead of mental health, I was depressed and abused and alone, and I felt like I was worthless. And I believe,
Yeah, well, that's a mental health issue, bud.
that if we can move past the bumper sticker slogans and get into the specifics of the details, then I think that we can find a common ground, because there really has to be a common ground, specifically on assault weapons. That there has to be a way that we can understand.
I love this man, but also like the conservative position on this has literally shifted over like the last couple years to just be like, there's nothing we can do. It's like the weather. Let's give classrooms rocks. Let's add tripwires to schools. Like, that's ridiculous and not going to work, because they don't want to fund mental health initiatives. And when they do want to fund mental health initiatives, it's to put people with mental health issues in institutions that they can't get out of, that are essentially prisons.
That the adult hunter who owns a bunch of rifles isn't the one that we're talking about. You aren't the problem. The problem is the teenager who thinks that blowing up the world is how he's going to fix himself.
And to that end, it's become fashionable in law enforcement and frankly in the media to sort of make this big thing. Like, we're not going to say the name of the shooter because all they want is notoriety, right? And you're saying that's just wrong.
I completely believe that's wrong. I think that there's not a single one that I've seen.
I mean, I think that there are some mass shooters who are doing these things with political motivations, absolutely. But I don't think many of them are doing it for notoriety.
And I've been studying a lot of these school shooters. There's not a single one that I've seen that wanted to have what we consider fame, that wanted to be Instagram famous or have a YouTube channel or have a bunch of followers. They don't want that. They want to be seen. However, right now we do have a bizarre phenomenon where we have the mirror social economy going on. We have a negative social world happening at the moment. Back in the day when I was a kid going to school, when I would bounce from school to school, I would have bullies at every school. I would have 5 or 6 bullies on one side, but I would have 3 or 4 kids on the other side to be a kind of a counterbalance. Okay. So, and in real life terms, that's always how it shakes out. You always have more bullies than not, but you end up having a kind of a counterbalance in person saying, hey, leave that kid alone. Okay. But now we have social media, and on social media, we have groups that are going to tell the kid how to be a bully, then how to be a better bully, and then give them rewards for being the best bully. True. And so at the heart of it, the kid has been searching.
By the way, those groups are like neo-Nazis. Neo-Nazis give affirmation for ever more violent acts. There are also, obviously other extremist groups out there, but a lot of them are incredibly lean towards the fascist end of the spectrum.
Time for someone to tell them that they're okay. I really believe that at the heart of it, that we all want for someone to hold us and tell us that we're okay. And if the person saying that we're okay is saying that to be okay, you have to be terrible, then you're going to be terrible.
One of the things you said that really got my attention was that there was always a counterbalancing force. Yeah, there were 5 or 6 bullies, but you said that there were always like 3 or 4 kids who were counterbalancing that. I don't think we hear that story very often. Is there any way that those kids can be uplifted and given the place that they deserve in helping to intervene in situations like that?
Absolutely, there is. And honestly, in those times, those were some of the little tiny islands of positivity in the ocean of destruction I was living in when I was a small kid. Were those kids who, when I would go to a school, they would see me as just a regular kid. You will never know how much impact a simple, hey, how are you doing, can have on somebody who in the rest of their world, they're just viewed as a monster or as a burden. Instead of looking at that kid like he's a threat, instead of saying that kid who's dark and smelly, watch out, you might be a threat, you might shoot up the school. All that's going to do is push them further out into the dark.
Aren't most shooters just neo-Nazis? Not necessarily. There are some shooters who are, basically just looking to go out. They're looking for suicide by cop. Some are looking to, like this guy, kind of just be seen. Others are doing so for politically motivated reasons, like the Christchurch shooter. Some are doing it because they are angry at how they've been treated socially by like women, like Elliot Rodger. There's a wide variety of reasons, but I don't think I've ever seen any of them that are doing it for like the fame.
I'm going to tell that kid that he thinks he's worthless and thinks he's nothing, that he's right. And we need to break that cycle and remind them that they're not.
Well, yeah, the ideologically motivated mass killers probably do want notoriety, but I don't think it's. I think that's distinct from like fame. They aren't looking to be like hailed as heroes. They view themselves as doing something heroic that no one else is able or willing to do. But they aren't looking to be held up as heroes. Some of them are looking to spark like race wars and shit, of course. But yeah, that's a good clarification, Erkt.
It's just a phase that the chaos they're in is going to pass, and that eventually they're going to make it to the light at the end of the tunnel, and they can exist in this pain. It's intense and it's hard, but they can make it through it.
Aaron Stark, I can't thank you enough for sharing your story with us. So thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And to everybody else listening, just give love to the ones you feel deserve it the least because they need it the most.
Damn, that was a really good interview.